What is the purpose of the United Nations? At least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war.
So the United Nations was founded at the end of the Second World War, and at the time the nations of Europe and also America and the Soviet Union are essentially trying to forge a new sort of security umbrella that will be in place when the war ends. And especially the war-ravaged nations of Europe are particularly desperate for this.
You members of this conference are to be the architects of a better world. In your hands rests our future.
And so it is essentially, it's a new League of Nations. The League of Nations had failed in the interwar years and it had failed to stop the Second World War. So this was one more great big effort to try and stop another war taking place. And so you get the United Nations founded, and eventually it has a headquarters in New York, and it sprouts all these other agencies that do all kinds of other peace building work. And, you have the World Health Organization and all these agencies that are generally intended to improve the prosperity of mankind.
The world needs the United Nations. In no way would we be better off without it. This remains the only organization capable of bringing together every country in the world.
So the UN has these big agencies that do a job in very difficult parts of the world. It's probably the only thing that we have like it that can do this kind of work. And so in that sense, it's pretty effective. It is a punching bag in terms of its failure to intervene, to stop huge humanitarian crises in the past. Of course, the genocide in Rwanda is often an example that's brought up. And its other issue is that it has an executive body, which is called the Security Council, which has 5 permanent members, all of which have been given a veto power. Now, the 5 permanent members were established in the aftermath of the Second World War, so they were the 5 who were sort of key to the foundation of the United Nations. That is the USA, Russia, China, Britain, and France, and any one of them can veto a resolution that they don't like. So this body has been deadlocked for years and years, especially in recent decades. And when one of its members invades another country, for instance, Russia invading Ukraine, Russia is obviously against any action to stop that. And so a lot of people sort of punch the UN for not being able to respond to these crises and being sort of crippled in some sense. But certainly in recent years, the UN has looked pretty ineffective in responding to sort of the big crises of the world, and often it's looked as if it's being short-circuited by the major powers.
Do you want your Board of Peace to replace the UN?
Well, it might. I mean, the UN just hasn't been very helpful. I'm a big fan of the UN potential, but it has never lived up to its potential.
The UN does perceive this Board of Peace as a potential threat, in that it's a sort of attempt to work around the UN and establish a separate organization. The leadership of the UN and the sort of party line has been very, look, we've dealt with other organizations in the past, it's quite normal for regional groups to form and we deal with them.
The Board of Peace has been authorized by the Security Council for its work on Gaza, strictly for that.
Trump, however, is, I think, a threat to the UN in that he sort of disparages some of the multilateral foundations on which the UN is based, all these ideas of international law and there being norms and rules by which people operate.
I ended 7 wars. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them.
Members of his cabinet have started to talk about spheres of influence in a sort of older model in which powerful countries are the dominant force in their own sphere. And I think that is a big threat to the United Nations. And all of that, I think, is seen as, a sense that some of the understanding that underpinned the UN is slightly disintegrating.
Let's be clear. The context is chaos. We are in a world brimming with conflict, impunity, inequality, and unpredictability. A world marked by self-defeating geopolitical divides, brazen violations of international law, and wholesale cuts in development and humanitarian aid.
I think that's a huge challenge for whoever is the next Secretary General. They're going to choose a new one this year, and whoever gets the job, and it's a really hard job, will have to try to address that.